If you are new to this channel, please take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe. What you are about to hear is not a feel-good story dressed up to look real. It is real, and that is precisely what makes it so difficult to forget. There is a question that most of us never have to answer out loud. What do you do when you have lost everything and you still have people depending on you? Not the abstract version of that question, the actual version. The version where there is no safety net, no fallback, no room in the budget because there is no budget, and someone who shares your last name is still looking to you to make it work. Marcus Webb answered that question every single day for 11 months. He was 47 years old. He had a daughter named Brianna who was 12. And for 11 months, the two of them lived in a 2004 Ford Explorer parked in the lot of a 24-hour Walmart in Decatur, Georgia, while Marcus worked a day labor job and Brianna went to school, and they both, by a kind of mutual unspoken agreement, conducted their lives with as much normalcy as the situation could be made to contain. Marcus applied to Family Feud from the parking lot. He used the Walmart Wi-Fi. He had 4 family members willing to drive from different parts of Georgia to compete alongside him. He had no preparation materials, no budget for practice sessions, and no illusions about what the prize money would mean if they won it. Steve Harvey met Marcus Webb on a Thursday afternoon in April 2024. By the time the taping ended, Steve had done something that the production team described as the single most unexpected moment in the show's recent history. This is what happened, and why it matters far beyond the walls of that studio. Marcus Webb grew up in College Park, Georgia, a working-class neighborhood southwest of Atlanta with the particular character of places where people have been getting by resourcefully for generations. His father drove a city bus for 27 years. His mother worked as a cashier at a grocery store and on weekends braided hair from the kitchen to supplement the household income. They were not people who discussed money as a subject of anxiety. They discussed it as a logistics problem, which is a more useful frame, and Marcus absorbed that frame early. He was a capable student, not exceptional but consistent, and after high school he enrolled at a technical college and completed a 2-year program in HVAC systems installation and repair. It was practical work, well suited to his mind and his hands, and for a long time it provided exactly the kind of steady livelihood that the program had promised. He worked for a mid-size commercial HVAC company in the Atlanta metro area for 11 years, building a reputation as someone who diagnosed problems accurately and showed up when he said he would. He married in his early 30s. Brianna was born in 2011. The marriage did not survive the years that followed, not because of any single failure, but because of the accumulating weight of 2 people who were each carrying more than they acknowledged, which is a common enough story and no less difficult for being common. The divorce was finalized in 2016. Marcus and his ex-wife agreed on shared custody. Brianna spent school weeks with her mother and alternating weekends with Marcus, an arrangement that worked until it didn't. In 2021, Marcus's ex-wife relocated to Charlotte, North Carolina, for a job opportunity that was significant and legitimate, and that Marcus did not contest. Brianna, who was 10 at the time and had expressed a preference for staying with her father and remaining in her school, was placed with Marcus as the primary custodial parent by mutual agreement and a revised court order. Marcus was glad to have her. Was also, by that point, beginning to feel the early pressure of what would become a much larger problem. The commercial HVAC company he had worked for since his mid-20s was acquired by a larger regional firm in late 2021. The acquisition brought restructuring, which brought a round of layoffs, which included Marcus in March 2022. He was not surprised, exactly, the signs had been present for months, but the timing was difficult. Brianna had just turned 11. The apartment they shared in Decatur had a monthly rent of $1,340. Marcus had savings that could cover 3 months, possibly 4 if he was careful, and he was always careful. He found contract work through a day labor agency within 3 weeks. The pay was irregular and significantly below what he had earned with the company, but it was work, and he was not someone who waited for better options when present options existed. He applied consistently to permanent HVAC positions throughout 2022. He received callbacks. He made it to final round interviews at 3 companies. Each time, the position was either filled internally or frozen due to budget conditions. He noted these outcomes without self-pity and continued applying. The savings ran out in January 2023. He made the decision quickly, because the situation required a quick decision, and Marcus had always been better at decisions than at deferring them. He gave notice on the apartment. He packed what was essential into the Ford Explorer: clothes, Brianna's school materials, a portable battery pack, a small cooler, and a laminated list of every public resource in DeKalb County that offered free showers, free meals, or free Wi-Fi. He had compiled the list over 2 weeks before they moved out, which was the kind of preparation that tells you everything you need to know about who Marcus Webb was. He did not tell Brianna everything immediately. He told her they were going through a temporary transition and that they were going to be fine and that her job was school, same as always. She was 12, old enough to understand more than he was saying and young enough still to accept the frame her father offered. She went to school every day. She kept her grades. She did not tell her teachers. She did not tell her friends. She understood without being instructed to understand that her father was managing something fragile and that her contribution to that management was to hold her part of their life together as steadily as she could. They had a system. Mornings, Marcus drove Brianna to school before reporting to the day labor pickup site. After school, Brianna went to the public library until Marcus finished for the day. The library had Wi-Fi, outlets, climate control, and staff who were accustomed to students doing homework there and asked no questions. Evenings, they ate from a combination of the cooler and twice a week, a hot meal program run by a church in Decatur that Marcus had found through the county resource list. Nights, they slept in the Explorer, reclined, with a privacy screen Marcus had fashioned from a reflective windshield shade and 2 fitted sheets. It was not comfortable. It was not supposed to be permanent. And it held together with a discipline and a love that, when you understand it fully, is genuinely difficult to describe without the word extraordinary. He applied to Family Feud in November 2023, sitting in the Walmart parking lot on a Tuesday evening after Brianna had fallen asleep. He had watched the show for years. He had thought about applying before. He filled out the form with the care of someone who understood that the details mattered, the personality section, the family description, the explanation of why they wanted to be on the show. He did not disclose their housing situation in the application. He simply described his family, himself, his daughter Brianna, his sister Donna, his cousin Terrence, and his aunt Me, who was 68 and who had raised Marcus alongside his parents during a difficult period of his childhood, and whom Marcus had called first when he decided to apply, because Me had always been the person he called first. The call from the production team came in February 2024. Taping was in April. Marcus had 2 months. He used them the way he used everything, efficiently, without waste. He researched survey answer patterns using the library computers. He ran practice sessions with Donna and Terrence and Me over video call from the library parking lot, where the signal was stronger. He told them the real situation 2 weeks before the taping, because they were going to be with him in Los Angeles, and he was not willing to let them be blindsided. They each responded in their own way. Donna went quiet for a moment and then said, "I'll drive you to the airport." Terrence said, "Man, why didn't you tell me?" Me said nothing at all for a long moment and then said, "You are your father's son, and that is a high compliment." And all 3 responses were, in their different registers, exactly what Marcus needed. The production team arranged travel and accommodation for the families. For Marcus and Brianna, the hotel room in Los Angeles was the first time either of them had slept in a bed in 11 months. Marcus lay awake for a while that first night. Brianna slept immediately and deeply. In the morning, she said the pillows were amazing. Marcus agreed that they were. The taping was on a Thursday. The Webb family, Marcus, Brianna, Donna, Terrence, and Me, arrived at the studio at 8:15 in the morning, and the atmosphere of the place, which is simultaneously more ordinary and more charged than television makes it appear, settled over them with the particular weight of a thing that is real and permanent in a way that no amount of preparation fully anticipates. Their opponents were the Flores family from Phoenix, 5 cousins ranging from their late 20s to their mid-40s, organized and competitive and warm, the kind of family that had clearly prepared together and enjoyed the preparation, which is itself a kind of advantage. They were a good draw, difficult without being intimidating. The green room beforehand had a quality of focused quiet that the production assistants who worked with the family noted later. Marcus sat with his competition notes, which were 3 pages of handwritten survey patterns organized by category, and reviewed them once. Then he folded them, put them in his jacket pocket, and spent the remaining time talking with Me and making sure Brianna knew where she was sitting in the audience and who to find if she needed anything. She told him she was fine. She was, in the specific and self-possessed way of a child who has learned to be fine under conditions that most adults would not be fine under. Steve Harvey came out to the opening and transformed the room in the way that he does, a presence that is difficult to account for in purely technical terms, and that every person who has been in a studio with him describes the same way. You simply feel that something real is happening. He introduced both families, and when he reached Marcus and the Webb family, his attention sharpened in the way that those who had worked with him for years recognized as the sign that something had registered. "Marcus Webb," Steve said. "Day laborer, Decatur, Georgia." "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "Day labor," Steve repeated. "That's hard work." "It's work," Marcus said. "I'm grateful for it." Steve looked at him for a moment longer than the introduction required. "You brought your daughter," he said, looking toward the audience where Brianna sat between two production assistants who had taken a particular interest in her from the moment the family arrived. "I did," Marcus said. "She's my good luck." "How old is she?" 12, Steve nodded. He looked at Brianna in the audience. She gave him a small wave, the self-contained wave of a child who is comfortable in unusual situations, which she had become by necessity without being given the option to become anything else. Steve turned back to Marcus with an expression that had shifted almost imperceptibly from host to something more personal. "She looks like she's going to be just fine," he said. Marcus said. "She already is." The game began. The Webb family was good in a way that was not flashy and did not need to be. Marcus was controlled and precise. Donna had an excellent instinct for lifestyle and domestic categories, which tended to cluster in the survey data more reliably than most contestants realized. Terrence was the wild card, unpredictable in a way that sometimes produced exceptional answers and sometimes didn't, but whose energy kept the family's rhythm from going flat under pressure. Me was a presence that was difficult to quantify and clearly valuable. She had the survey sensibility of a woman who had spent 7 decades paying attention to what people actually did versus what they said they did, and those two things diverged in ways that Family Feud answers tended to expose. The Flores family was their match point for point through the first 2 rounds. They were faster on the buzzer and compensated with instinct what the Webbs compensated with preparation. Going into the 3rd round, the Flores family led by 31 points, a recoverable deficit but not a comfortable one. Marcus stepped to the face-off podium for the final round. Donna gripped his arm once briefly as he passed. He did not need to look at her to understand it. Flores family sent their eldest cousin, a woman named Carmen who had been the family's most consistent performer through the first 2 rounds, measured, strategic, someone who understood the game at a structural level. Steve read the question. "Name something a person does every morning without fail, no matter what." Carmen buzzed in. "Brush their teeth." Number 2 answer, 34 points. Marcus pressed the buzzer. "Get up," he said. The board scanned. Number 1 answer, 61 points. The studio responded with a sound that was part laughter, part something else, something that happens when an answer is so correct it seems obvious in retrospect, and yet nobody else said it. Steve Harvey looked at Marcus with an expression that was undisguised. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, quietly enough that it was almost private, "Yeah, that's the one." The Webb family won the main game by 47 points. Marcus sent Donna to fast money first. She was steady and thorough and came back with 139 points, a strong, reliable foundation. Marcus needed 61 points from 5 questions. He walked to the fast money podium slowly. Brianna was in the front row. She had stopped pretending to be casual about it. She was watching her father with the full and open attention of a child who has decided that this moment deserves to be taken seriously, which it did. Steve stood with Marcus at the podium and spoke quietly. "You've been getting up every morning no matter what for a long time," Steve said. "I can see that. Whatever's been going on, whatever you've been carrying, I can see it." He paused. "For the next 20 seconds, let the preparation do the work. You've already done the hard part." Marcus looked at him. Something passed across his face, a brief, unguarded moment of acknowledgement, the expression of a man who has been seen accurately and is not accustomed to that and does not quite know what to do with it. Then the expression settled back into focus. "I've been ready for this since November," Marcus said. The clock started. "Name the most important quality in a good father." Marcus answered immediately, "Being there." "Name something a family does together that costs nothing." "Talk," he said. "Name a word that describes a person who never gives up." "Strong." "Name something a child needs most from a parent." "Security," Marcus said, and the word came out with a weight that everyone in the room felt. "Name something people take for granted until they lose it." Marcus paused for one beat, the same kind of weighted pause that anyone watching would remember long after the episode ended, and said, "Home." The buzzer sounded. "Being there," number 1 answer, 44 points. The audience began to understand what was happening. "Talk," number 1 answer, 38 points. "Strong," number 1 answer, 29 points. "Security," number 1 answer, 41 points. The studio was already on its feet. The math had been done in every head in the room. Marcus needed 61 points from 5 answers. He had 152 points from 4. Home, the board scanned. The studio held completely still. Number one answer, 57 points. Total, 209 points. Combined with Donna's 139, 348 points. The Webb family had won $20,000. Marcus stood at the podium and did not move. He stood with his hands flat on the surface of the podium and his head bowed and his eyes closed, and the expression on his face was not celebration, and it was not relief exactly. It was the expression of a man who has been holding something at a controlled distance for a very long time and has suddenly been permitted to feel the full weight of it. It lasted perhaps 10 seconds. Then he raised his head, looked at Brianna in the front row. She was standing, both hands pressed to her face, crying with the unguarded completeness of a 12-year-old who has been holding herself together for 11 months and has just been told it is safe to stop. Marcus left the podium. He crossed the studio floor to his daughter and held her, and she held him, and neither of them said anything for a long time. Steve Harvey watched from the stage. He did not reach for the microphone. He waited. And as he waited, something shifted in his expression, the look of a man who has just understood something fully that he had only partially understood before. When Marcus finally turned back toward the stage, Steve was already walking toward him. "Marcus," he said, "before anyone leaves this building, I need you to tell me something." The studio had the quality of a room that has decided, collectively, to be patient. 200 people sat in complete stillness. The production crew had stopped their usual end-of-segment movements. Even the floor director, who held the show's timing as a professional responsibility, had lowered her clipboard. Steve Harvey stood with Marcus Webb at the center of the stage, and he asked the question plainly. "Where are you and Brianna living right now?" Marcus looked at him, looked briefly at Brianna, who was standing beside Donna now, Donna's arm around her. Then he looked back at Steve, and he told him. He told it with the measured, factual delivery of a man who had long since made peace with the circumstances and was no longer interested in being ashamed of them, only in being accurate. The Explorer, the Walmart parking lot, the library, the church hot meal program, the laminated resource list, the 11 months. He stated it all in sequence without drama, the way a mechanic describes the stages of a repair. This is what happened, this is what I did about it, this is where we are. He said, "I want to be clear about one thing. Brianna went to school every single day. Her grades did not drop. She did her homework at the library, and she did not tell a single person at that school what was happening at home because she made a decision that her job was school and she was going to do her job. That is not me. That is her. Whatever I did, she matched it and then some." The studio was completely silent. Steve Harvey stood with his hands clasped in front of him, and for a moment he did not speak. He had the specific expression of a man who is processing something that requires more than his usual speed of processing, not because it is confusing, but because it is large, and large things require a moment. Then he said, "Brianna." Brianna looked up. "Come here," Steve said. She crossed the studio floor with the composure of a 12-year-old who has learned composure as a survival skill and now carries it as a character trait. She stood beside her father. Steve Harvey crouched down slightly, not patronizingly, but in the genuine way of a tall man trying to meet a child's eye level, and he said, "Your dad just told me what you did this year, going to school every day, keeping your grades, not telling anyone." He paused. "That took something most adults don't have." "I want you to know that I see it," Brianna said. "My dad worked every day too." Steve Harvey straightened up. He looked at Marcus. He said, "I know he did." He turned to face the audience and the cameras, and his voice shifted into the register he used when he was not performing but simply speaking the truth as he understood it. "I have been in this business for 30 years, he said. "I have been on stages in front of audiences all over this country. I have met people who have been through things that would break most people, and every now and then I meet someone who reminds me that the word dignity is not an abstract concept. It is a practice. It is something you do every single morning when you get up, no matter what, which, by the way, was the number one answer on that board." He paused. Marcus Webb did not get that answer from a study guide. He got it from his life. He turned back to Marcus. "I'm not going to let you walk out of this building with a check and a handshake," Steve said. "That's not what happens today. Today we are going to do something different." What followed was not a single gesture, but a coordinated sequence of commitments that Steve Harvey's team had, in fact, prepared in general terms for moments exactly like this one. Because Steve Harvey was not a man who encountered this kind of story without a framework for responding to it. His foundation had existing relationships with transitional housing organizations in the Atlanta metro area. It had relationships with workforce development programs that specialized in skilled trades re-entry. It had, in other words, the infrastructure to do more than write a check. On stage, Steve made 4 specific commitments. First, his foundation would connect Marcus with a transitional housing organization in DeKalb County that provided furnished apartments at subsidized rates to working adults in recovery from housing instability, with the explicit goal of stable housing for Marcus and Brianna before the school year ended. Second, the foundation would cover Brianna's school enrollment continuity, ensuring that the housing transition did not require a school change and that her existing academic record transferred intact. Third, Steve personally committed to connecting Marcus with 3 HVAC companies in the Atlanta area that his team would contact on Marcus's behalf, not as charity, but as a referral from someone whose recommendation those companies would take seriously, because relationships are the currency of the labor market and Marcus had been cut off from the networks that generate them. Fourth, and this was the moment the studio responded to most viscerally, Steve announced that Brianna would receive a college savings contribution from his foundation, structured as a fund that would accumulate until her 18th birthday. He made each commitment directly and specifically without rhetorical embellishment, which was more powerful than embellishment would have been. Marcus stood through all of it with his hand on Brianna's shoulder. He did not cry. He was a man who by now had used up his available capacity for being surprised by difficulty and had not yet had the time to develop a corresponding capacity for being surprised by kindness. He looked like a man learning in real time that the second capacity was also possible. When Steve finished, Marcus said, "Mr. Harvey, I came here to win enough money to get us into an apartment. I did not expect any of this." Steve said, "I know you didn't. That's why it's possible." He looked at Brianna one more time. "Young lady," he said, "when you are standing on a stage someday and you will be one way or another, remember this day, not because of the money, because of what you and your father showed everyone in this room about what it looks like to hold your head up when everything is going wrong. That is the most valuable thing you will ever own. Nobody can take it from you." Brianna said, "Yes, sir." Me, who had been watching from the family side of the stage with the specific expression of an elder who is watching something she always believed would eventually be confirmed, stepped forward and placed her hand on Marcus's back and said nothing at all. She did not need to. The episode aired in May 2024. The response was immediate and global in a way that the production team had not seen since a small number of other episodes that had crossed the line from television moment into something more broadly cultural. The clip of Marcus saying the word, "home," the pause before it, the weight in it, the way Steve Harvey's face changed when the board confirmed it as the #1 answer, was viewed more than 18 million times in the first 72 hours. It was shared in every format, on every platform, and across demographic lines that Family Feud content did not typically cross. Labor organizers shared it, educators shared it, social workers shared it, parents shared it with the caption, "Watch this with your kids." Children shared it with the caption, "Watch this, Mom." What people wrote about, consistently and across many different communities, was not the prize money and not Steve Harvey's gesture, though both were covered extensively. What people wrote about was the answer, home, the pause, the wait, and the board confirming it as though the survey of 1,000 ordinary Americans had been waiting for exactly that answer from exactly that person at exactly that moment. A journalist writing for a national publication described watching the clip 3 times in a row and not being able to explain why. She wrote, "I think it's because we spend a great deal of time being told that housing is an economic issue." Marcus Webb spent 11 months demonstrating that it is a human one. The survey knew that. He knew that. The rest of us needed a moment to catch up. The transitional housing placement was completed in June 2024, before the school year ended, as Steve's team had committed. Marcus and Brianna moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in DeKalb County on a Saturday in June. Brianna helped carry boxes. She made a point of being the one to put her own things in her own room, which was something she had not had in 11 months. Marcus stood in the doorway and watched her arrange her desk and her books and said nothing, because there was nothing adequate to say, and he was a man who understood the difference between things that required words and things that didn't. The HVAC referrals yielded results within 3 months. One of the 3 companies Steve's team contacted offered Marcus a permanent position in August 2024, commercial systems, his original field, at a salary that was modestly above what he had earned before the acquisition that had ended his previous position. He started on a Monday. He drove to the job site in the Ford Explorer, which he had maintained through 11 months of living in it with the same discipline he applied to everything, and which ran as reliably as it ever had. Brianna finished 7th grade with a 3.8 GPA. She told her school counselor about the previous year, not everything, but enough in a conversation she initiated herself in October 2024, after the episode had aired and she had watched it at home in their apartment on their couch, with her father beside her. The counselor, who had not known, sat with the information for a moment and then said, "I want you to know that what you did going to school every day and not letting any of us know you needed help was remarkable. And I also want you to know that if you ever need help again, this is a safe place to ask for it." Brianna thanked her. She said she would remember that. The college savings fund that Steve's foundation established became, over the following year, something that other donors contributed to after the story became widely known. By the time Brianna turned 13, the fund had grown beyond what Steve's initial contribution had seeded it with, through the accumulated contributions of people who had watched the episode and wanted to do something specific and lasting. Marcus was informed of the total at a follow-up meeting with the foundation and sat with the number for a long moment before saying that he needed a minute. He took the minute. Then he called me. Me, for her part, told everyone she knew. She had watched the episode 6 times by her own count and described it to her church group, her neighbors, and her doctor at her annual physical in terms that the doctor later mentioned to a colleague, because she had found the description unexpectedly moving. Me said, "My nephew drove across the country with his daughter and a notebook of survey answers, and he stood on that stage and told the truth, and the truth turned out to be worth more than he knew." She said this with the satisfaction of a woman who had always believed it would be. The Ford Explorer was sold in September 2024. Marcus had kept it maintained. He was incapable of owning a vehicle and not keeping it maintained. And it sold for $4,800, which he put directly into a separate savings account he opened the same afternoon. He did not explain this account to Brianna except to say that it was for emergencies, which was enough of an explanation. Steve Harvey spoke about Marcus and Brianna at 2 separate events in the months following the episode. Once at a homelessness awareness conference in Atlanta, where he had been invited to speak, and once at a more informal gathering with his foundation's staff and partners. At the conference, his remarks were formal and purposeful, covering housing instability among working adults with dependents, the failure of existing systems to account for people who were employed and still unable to maintain housing, and the specific invisibility of families like Marcus's who were functioning adequately on every metric that institutions measured while existing in circumstances those institutions were not designed to see. At the staff gathering, he was less formal. He said that what Marcus had said to him, "I've been ready for this since November," was one of the most quietly devastating things he had heard in a long time. He said, he had been ready since November. He was sitting in a parking lot with his daughter and a borrowed Wi-Fi connection, and he was getting ready. I think about that sentence a lot. I think about what it means to be that kind of ready. Marcus returned to Family Feud 1 year after his appearance, at the show's invitation, for a brief update segment. He came with Brianna, who was 13 now and had grown in ways that were visible and ways that were not. He came in his work clothes because the taping was on a Wednesday, and he had worked that morning and would work the following morning, and was not a man who took days off without purpose. He came with me, who wore her best church hat and sat in the front row and was recognized by several members of the audience who had seen the original episode and pointed her out to the people beside them. Steve Harvey greeted Marcus the way he greeted people he was genuinely glad to see, with his full attention, unhurried, present. He asked how Brianna was doing. Marcus said she was doing well. He asked how the job was going. Marcus said it was going well. He asked what Marcus wanted people watching to understand about the past year. Marcus thought about the question for a moment with the care he gave to questions that deserved care. He said, "I want them to understand that there is no version of that year where I was not working. I worked every day. I drove my daughter to school every day. We did what we had to do, and we did it with our heads up. I'm not saying that so people will think we're special. I'm saying it because I know there are people watching this right now who are in the same situation or worse, and they are doing the same thing, working, keeping their kids in school, holding it together, and they have been told in ways that are not always said out loud but are clearly communicated that their situation is a moral failure. It is not a moral failure. It is a circumstance, and circumstances change." He paused. "Mine did. I hope theirs will too." Steve Harvey looked at him for a moment and then said simply, "That's the one." Brianna, sitting in the front row, wrote something in the notebook she had brought. She did not show it to anyone. Later, Marcus would find it on the kitchen table, their kitchen table in their apartment, and read it. She had written, "Circumstances change, remember that." He left the note where it was. "If this story stayed with you, if you thought about someone while you were listening, please share it with them. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, now is exactly the right moment. Every week we find stories like Marcus and Brianna's. Real people, real circumstances, real moments of grace that the news does not have time for and that this channel exists to carry. Like this video and subscribe. We will see you next time.